Alrighty, hello everybody. Jimmy Smith here, Wine with Jimmy. I have a really fascinating and interesting session here because we have the gentleman himself, all the way from the Netherlands, but coming live from Austria with great geology behind him as well. It's
Thank you.
Sietze Wijma. How are you doing, my friend?
Yes, I'm very well. Yourself?
We're doing good here. Yeah, very good. So you have definitely upstaged me with the shirt. You've definitely upstaged me with the geology. You've got a spiral staircase behind you. I feel like I've really not done well for the backdrop. Yeah, so I think I'm going to have to try and engage as much as possible just to get on a level playing field with you, Sietze.
Right.
But it's
There's
really
carpentry there, so that's some
right, yeah, and it's at an angle as well. So yeah, but it's quite special.
precisely.
Yeah, really delightful to have you on board. Now, for those of you out there, let me give you a little introduction about Sietze. So, really interesting chap, very noticeable, of course, for his mustache. I think that stands out on Instagram very famously. Always looking dapper, which is very important. But Sietze has a master's in sensory science, and he has a company called The Art of Tasting, which he bases out the Netherlands. But as we know, Sietze, you travel a lot, don't you? Teaching about all things around sensory perception, and your business is based on adding compounds to wine to then teach people through those compounds. Would you like to add anything about that?
I think that captures it very well. So we run in-person classes. We also supply tasting kits. We will be using that today. So exactly, you've received them. I have a set on my end as well. So we're going to be talking through the exact same aromatic compounds and sharing our experiences with how these compounds smell and how they affect the palate as well.
And that's
So
really fascinating, Sita, because of course, with people that are studying WSET, often when they are presented with the systematic approach to tasting, they don't have any or very little experience with all of those compounds. They might know some of them, they'll be able to recognize some of the
yeah,
fruits and the flowers, but you're actually going to put the science behind it, and in a practical form as well, help people understand, of course, those compounds that they're experiencing.
yeah, I think well said. And just to let people know what to expect, because I offer sessions using white wines, which we'll do today, also red wines, and I teach about wine faults as well. But what we're doing today is dedicated to some of the positive flavors you find in white wine. So the novel flavors that are the result of certain grape varieties or winemaking techniques.
Great. So excited. And then we have three glasses. So I've got my three here off camera. You can see that Stitzer has his sitting in front of him. Now, what we've got in these glasses that we have a kind of a base sample, a reference, which is the first one. So that is the pure form of the wine with no adulteration to it. So it is just
Yes.
the wine purely itself. And then from then on, samples 2 to 11, is that correct? 2 to 11 or 2 to 10?
Yeah, actually, it starts with one, so it's like
Okay, yeah.
1 to 10. Yeah.
So yeah, the samples following that 1 through to 10 have been, or let's use the word spiked with
Yeah.
something so we can actually detect those. And I think that's a really fascinating way of picking out one compound and focusing on it. Because of course, when you taste normal wines and you're in a WSET setting and you're going through it, you're going to be experiencing volatile compounds that may be floral, that may be fruity, that may be herbaceous, mineral, oak. And often it's quite difficult for students to identify single things because it's complex, right? And it's a skill that they're learning, but you're honing in on one with a very neutral base wine. So adding that compound, and hopefully that helps us identify it quite easily. Great. All right.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the first, which the reference. We should talk about the reference wine first of all, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So by all means, give it a smell. Um, as you've already done, you're swirling it to bring out the aroma a bit more.
Mhm.
I've a unoaked Chardonnay here. It's deliberately chosen to be pretty neutral. There's some fruitiness going on, but not much else. Usually, I don't go too much in depth about the reference wine. We're just gonna call it white wine from going forward. And indeed, all of the other glasses has that exact same base wine plus an added compound. So you can go ahead and have a taste as well. Great. All of the other samples are also safe to smell and to taste. So I've used the same compounds that naturally occur in wine. I've also done an addition at a level that you can reasonably expect to find in wine. So these two properties make it that they're safe to taste because they're basically a replication of what real wines are.
And Sietze, can you just tell me through your bottling process? You're adding the wine, you're adding the spike to it, the certain compound. And is that it sealed under gas and things like that?
Yes, it is. So the wines are poured chilled, so that prevents some oxidation during the transfer. Indeed, the compounds are added, and then they're preserved with an inert gas that makes the samples that they keep reasonably at least a month. But if you're chilling the wines yourself, so they can potentially keep for longer.
Great. Right. And I love that you've picked an oak Chardonnay because, of course, this is going to be a video that goes out to a lot of my following, and my following are WSET studiers, right? And of course, they learn two major white grape varieties that are non-aromatic, and that is Chardonnay and Chenin Blanc. There are others, but they're two major varieties, certainly the Chardonnay, and it's really useful to link that knowledge for them as a non-aromatic that you're using for this because you want the most neutral, non-aromatic base wine.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So
So
that would
just to go to number one.
I would love to. Yes. The first one was just a simple white wine with fresh sort of character to it.
Yeah.
In this one then, okay.
So I'm gonna make it easy for you. For the first one, I'll just reveal this is the smell of green bell pepper. So
Already, I'm gonna guess.
yeah,
Funny.
you'll have some guessing opportunities later on. Yes. That is what I call the go-to descriptor, the consensus descriptor. That's what most people would describe this as. Of course, there are personal differences. Some people say to me, I'm not really getting the green bell pepper, more of a green bean smell. So I think that's a perfect descriptor. Uncooked green beans, so the unboiled ones, especially if you chop off the ends of green beans, it very much releases the same smell as what you're getting here. It's an earthy component to it as well. And then some more niche descriptors include ginseng, which is used by some Chinese wine tasters, as well as blackjack. It's a plant that you see in Africa that releases the same smell. So there's multiple ways that you could look at this, but in say WSET terminology, this is green bell pepper.
And Sietze, that's really important that you have just, in that little segue there, you've described not just the WSET go-to descriptor, you have then brought in other cultures, because that's something I think that the English-speaking world tend to forget about, that there are other parts of the world that won't necessarily have those compounds, be it something, along the lines of elderflower or gooseberry. And then you're able, and I love this in a lot of your videos and a lot of your Instagram that you've been doing, that you've been helping other cultures and people around the world link to those, right? You're saying that, like I just mentioned with ginseng, that you've got that sort of similarity, which is such a real smart and interesting way to do it. Really good.
Yeah, I love that you're highlighting this. And indeed, like a green bell pepper is reasonably available worldwide. But not every culture uses it. So there could be some people around the world that maybe eat a green bell pepper once a year, and they're not too familiar with that particular smell, and maybe other descriptors resonate more with them.
And anybody out there, if you're watching this and you have you've enjoyed this sort of compound before, but you have a different descriptor for it, please do get in touch and let us know what you are experiencing, because I'm sure Sietze is the same as me. When I start to hear other things, I then go and research, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to start adding that to my presentations because that's really useful for me to talk about that. So please do engage and pop down your comments. Now, Sietze, tell me about the chemistry behind this compound.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about how this comes in wine. So this is linked to your particular white grape variety, and that is a Sauvignon Blanc. So in the context of white wine, that's pretty much the only variety that makes it. There's some other red varieties that do it as well, notably Cabernet Sauvignon, and then Cabernet Franc as well. But it's really Sauvignon Blanc in white wines, and it's also linked to climate. So if you're growing your Sauvignon Blanc grapes in somewhat cooler climates, you're getting higher levels of this particular compound. And in a similar fashion, if you're looking at sunlight exposure to the grapes, sunlight typically degrades this flavor. So that means that shady conditions promote the flavor, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Everybody at home will be thinking, well, please tell me this compound. Is it easy for me to remember how to say this compound? Please tell everybody what it is.
Okay, so pretty long chemical name, isobutyl methoxypyrazine. So it belongs to a family of compounds called the pyrazines. And oftentimes when people refer to this compound, they just say pyrazines to make it a bit easier to remember.
And I actually, when I'm helping my students, certainly diploma students, I'm often saying, look, for me, there's a little phrase I say, pyrazine means green. That's the way that
I love it.
that kind of rhyming just to help people remember that. And I love that you're linking in the climate there because, you know, in cooler places, like you mentioned, this aroma precursor that we have, is it something you can taste in the grapes or is it something that's produced through fermentation, methoxypyrazine?
You can actually get it in the grapes themselves. So suppose you would be in a vineyard and picking Sauvignon Blanc grapes that are ripening, that
Yep.
flavor will already be noticeable. And that doesn't happen very often. And
No.
we know this intuitively because grapes have a very different flavor than wine. So there's so much that happens during fermentation as well during post-fermentation winemaking. In these there's a lot of conversions, but this is one of the compounds that is actually extremely stable. Yeast doesn't go anywhere near it. It doesn't touch it. It just is produced by the grape and it survives the whole winemaking process and then is also noticeable in the finished wine.
So, Sietze, if somebody, a grape grower, for instance, was looking to avoid these compounds, but they're working with Sauvignon Blanc, linking back to what you're saying with climate, they are going to be giving it more sun exposure, picking later maybe to have more ripeness.
Precisely.
Yeah,
Those are probably the two main things that they will be doing. So some clever pruning regimes to maximize sun exposure to the grapes. And indeed, you could pick slightly later as well. So it's mostly managed in the vineyard.
Yeah.
There are some things you can do in the winery. For example, if you clarify prior to fermentation, you're also removing some pyrazines from your wine. So
No,
that's
interesting.
a thing you can do in the winery, but most of this is managed by the grape grower.
And so therefore it's kind of the compound of methoxypyrazine is kind of like rotundone, right? In terms of the black pepper, which you can taste in the grape, right?
Yes, slightly different mechanisms by which it ripens. But it's similar in the fashion that indeed it is noticeable in the grape.
The grape.
Another way to describe that is it's present in its free form. So it's not connected, it's not bound to anything, it's not like trapped in the grape, it's just there available for your sensory systems, if you like.
Fascinating. Great. And any other varieties other than Sauvignon Blanc that this is found on, methoxypyrazine, or is it just Sauvignon Blanc?
Not in white wine, no. It's just Sauvignon Blanc.
Great. So yes, you mentioned Cabernet Sauvignon, didn't you? Carmenere, and red varieties, but white wine, it's just Sauvignon. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Fascinating. Should we go to number 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so
We're still.
number 1 was obviously very distinctly green pepper.
Yeah.
This one's a little bit more challenging. It's
Yes.
more subtle. I think for me, if I go through the motions, I don't think it's herbaceous or herbal. I don't think it's another compound like a spice or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about fruit compound. I think this therefore will be, and it's not a second, it's definitely not a secondary. So this is going to be floral, maybe?
Yes. Very good start. I think this flavor is more noticeable on the palate. So it's well worth trying the wine as well. And another trick that I love with those flavors that are more dominant on the palate is I'm pinching my nose, trying the wine and spitting, and then releasing my nose. So what it looks like is this.
I'm pretty sure I've seen pictures on Instagram of you doing that before.
Precisely. So spit, release your nose. And as soon as you open your nose, I think it's more noticeable. This is a different side of Sauvignon Blanc, commonly described as elderflower.
Yes. Well, I was in the right poster. Yeah.
Hence the floral sensation, indeed. Yeah. And there's also something tropical about this. So descriptors like passion fruit and guava are common.
Okay.
This is also the component that causes the cat pee descriptor in Sauvignon Blanc, particularly at higher concentrations. So maybe not something that stands out at this level, but if you get high concentrations, it can definitely come across in that way. So it's a very distinguishing character in Sauvignon Blanc that is sometimes disliked by people, but appreciated by others.
Well, yes, because some people, certainly in school, Sietze will say, "Yeah, this smells like cat pee," and then they'll go, and then actually they really like it. So it's an interesting connection to make. Fascinating.
Yeah.
What is the compound?
It is called 4-MMP. So
Okay.
this is a abbreviation of a very long chemical name, once again. It belongs to the category of thiols. These thiols are sulfur-containing compounds.
Yeah.
Sulfur compounds don't have a very good name in the wine world because it's often associated with the fault reduction. And indeed, there are sulfur compounds that can smell like boiled eggs, drains, common,
Yeah. Yeah.
not positive aromas at all, but there are certainly some, including this one, that are very important for varietal flavors.
And Sietze, we work in my winery here with Bacchus, and I'm sure you've come across Bacchus before, which during fermentation can become very reductive with thiol base, and it can often smell kind of, it can be farty. You know, is that in the same group? Does that come in under thiols, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. And that farty notes are
Yeah, it's kind of like it could be like cooked vegetables and things like that as well, but
yeah,
not necessarily too nice.
yeah. And there are two main compounds causing that. It's hydrogen sulfide, which is the eggy one, and invaluable captain, which is a reaction product of H2S or
Okay.
hydrogen sulfide.
Okay.
And these two combined can give those impressions, indeed. Yeah, and some varieties have a greater tendency to that than others.
And it might be interesting then to talk about the kind of winemaking behind it, if we can. So, if a winemaker is experiencing higher levels of things like H2S and reductive smells, what is it that they would need to be doing in winemaking in order to diminish those issues?
It is usually linked to a lack of nutrients for yeast. So it means that yeast is struggling. And another way to put that is you're dealing with stressed yeast. And a very common way of dealing with that is the supplementation of nitrogen to the grape must.
Yeah.
So depending on what kind of philosophy you have as a winemaker, if you're maybe low intervention or not, that could be an option for you. And that is the way to typically avoid that. And this is also interestingly linked to the soil and the nutrient status of the soil in which the grapes grow. So if you're dealing with relatively fertile soils, then this might not be a problem because there's already enough nitrogen being pulled up by the roots and which ends up in the grape, which is then a nutrient source for yeast.
Cool.
So there's different strategies here. I was talking with a winemaker yesterday. He doesn't add nitrogen until this smell appears in his must. So, you could sort of preventively add it, or you could have more strategy, if you like. But it's commonly linked to nitrogen. And the other important factor here is oxygen. So if yeast needs small amounts of oxygen as well, and if it's completely devoid of oxygen, then this problem becomes worse.
Okay. Yeah, we generally will here with Bacchus, we'll make sure that there is oxygen for the ferment, certainly by often sort of moving the wine around, for example. We're making sure that, it's racked, but it moves around and it gets a bit of oxygen into it. And it means that, hopefully that smell kind of blows off, which it always does in the end. It's fascinating. As a new winemaker, when I first started making wine in 2022, I remember being like, just really like, oh my God, this is really reductive compounds. And what are we going to do? And the smell is intense, but there is a bit of patience that can be done and steps taken, like you mentioned. But as low intervention, we weren't adding any nutrients, but we're just making sure as much as possible that the ferment would continue and then move it around. So yeah, great. Love those. For people to be able to link these things to their knowledge and their studying. Okay, so that's an elderflower complete.
Precisely. What we're going to do, I think you have them in separate glasses, so that allows you to actually mix them together like this.
Yeah.
And then give that a smell. And these are the two Sauvignon Blanc characters put together. So that gives more of an impression of what a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc could do, for example.
And that's really fascinating, Sietze, because the 4-MMP of elderflower is slightly taming the rampant nature of methoxypyrazine, right?
Yep.
It's just sort of curbing it a little bit, which is of course what they do with New Zealand Sauvignon.
Yeah, precisely. So yeah, definitely worth tasting indeed. And then we're also gonna get rid of the rest of the wine.
Okay.
And that will leave us with 2 empty glasses where we can then go ahead and pour 3 and 4.